hello one and all, it's your grumpy old git here, out and about in the wonderful May sunshine. Thought I'd come and do a little bit of a follow-up with my conspiracy theory original Raven rant, which can be found on the link down below. Down below there, yes. And I do have to keep glancing down because I'm out in the lovely park here locally, and just in case we come across any potholes or something similar that haven't been filled in, thought I'd better just keep glancing down because I fell foul of that the other week when I was over in one of the towns. But yes, the great conspiracy theories. We've always said that, well, I've always said I'm in an area that I describe as the CTK squared area, and that is the greatest propensity and concentration of conspiracy theorists per square kilometre. Now, just a little bit of a preamble beforehand. Well, I always preamble, you know, isn't that? Look at that, isn't that lovely? Lovely parkland, just only a few moments from my abode. Those of you of a certain age, perhaps prog rock fans in particular, are familiar with the group Yes. When they first started, well, they started way back in 1968, I think it was 67, 68, in their first reincarnation, the original one. They brought out a double album in the 70s that was called Tales from Topographic Oceans. And it was a lumbering things. An LP, by the way, for those of you not of an age, is a long playing vinyl. You sometimes see them now popping up in shops all over the place, a great resurgence in vinyl. They brought out this Tales from Topographic Oceans, which was, again, a typical Yes masterpiece. A lot of rambling solos and the like, because it was 4 sides of vinyl, 20 minutes a side, 80 minutes in total, and just 4 songs on the entire album, 1 per side. And it just rambled away merrily, good music, but nobody had an idea what the lyrics that John Anderson had written. Nobody had a clue. Now, they were based on the Indian Vedas. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly for anybody of Indian origin who's watching, the scriptures. And it was just, went on and on, ambled away merrily. And because music aficionados of the time didn't really know what he was on about, up sprang possibly the very first of the major rock conspiracy theories, and all sorts of people were just sort of making what they would of these very rambling lyrics. And I mean, to this day, if you listen to any Yes album where John Anderson sings, fabulous voice, in his 80s and still singing as good as he ever was, with a new group now he's in, a new backing group that play all the Yes songs. I think they're doing a concert here, if I'm not mistaken, in Manchester in September. But anyway, from that sprang some mighty fine thoughts that people had that were, well, thoughts, not really thoughts, about what the lyrics were all about. This was because the conspiracy theorists just found the lyrics completely impenetrable. And I, for one, I've had a listen and I've read the lyrics and I haven't a clue what he's on about. But it all comes around to the fact that, as I said before, conspiracy theorists tend to suffer from something called Dunning-Kruger syndrome, which can be summed up in just a few words. They think they think. Yes, just have a think about that for a moment. Yes, their powers of critical thinking is the fact that they critically just don't think. So what they do is they make up what they don't know. Now, don't get me wrong, the actual conspiracy theorist originators, they do it for various nefarious means, spreading disinformation, and nowadays with the clicks, payment per clicks system that works, they're quite happy to make a living off the poor saps who believe the nonsense that they spread. And it's the conspiracy theory spreaders who, more often than not, are actually innocent. The reason they're innocent is because they don't check further than the little, as I've said before on many occasions, they don't go further than this little 4-inch screen that's in front of them. And even though facts may present themselves as totally improbable, they just don't pay any attention to it. They don't think of doing a little bit of what's called research just to check. And there are red flags with some of these conspiracy theories because any normal person, or any sense, sorry, that's wrong, not normal, any intelligent person, and remember, you don't have to be intelligent if you're clever. There's a lot of clever people out there who haven't got any intelligence whatsoever. It's the opposite way around usually, that intelligence really, I suppose you might say it's imbued with common sense, which is part of the problem. They don't have common sense. And that brings me to the very first one today that's doing the rounds still here, is that smart meters. Yes, we're all familiar with those lovely things that tick away and tell us exactly how much money we're wasting on lining the pockets of the management of the various electricity firms, and particularly now that the pardon me, the energy has gone up dramatically, they're making even more money. But did you know, and this is a fact according to the conspiracy theorists, that smart meters, and I quote verbatim here, they are rotting our brains with their rays. And what they're doing is they're actually controlling the amount of energy we use. Now, if you have a smart meter, I'm sure you've probably noticed that it doesn't control the energy you use, it just merrily clicks away quite happily, racking up payment that's due. So that's that one out for a start. Another one now doing the rounds locally here is that cholesterol pills are killing you. Yes, killing you stone dead. And as you can see from me, I've been on them for about 12 years now, and I'm pretty dead. Although in my case, it's only from the neck upwards. But hang on a second now, my dear CTK squared people. Yes, cholesterol pills will kill you if you don't take them correctly. My most favourite of all fruits is grapefruit, and if you read the little white sheet that comes with your cholesterol pills, it's one thing you've got to avoid. And the other thing you've got to avoid for your cholesterol pills to work correctly is not head off to Greg's for your breakfast, and then off into McDonald's for your lunch, and then on the way home, get a Kentucky Fried Chicken. Because yes, your cholesterol pills won't work if you start eating that sort of fatty, horrible stuff. Well, they'll work, but they will have to work mighty hard, and your prescription will probably have to increase to take that into account. But sorry, folks, done a lot of research about this. Cholesterol pills aren't killing you unless you have some existing problem that is not compatible and it wasn't picked up. The other one that did the rounds hot on the heels of the local elections we've just had is that, according to our friends, the conspiracy theorists locally, that all the elections were rigged. Well, yeah, rigged. You look at the television and you see the counting, and there's loads of people wandering around looking over people's shoulders, etc., etc. We're one of the few countries in the world where the actual election results are never rigged. They're all very democratically done, and where we put our X is counted up, put in a little box, or number crunched in a computer, and hey presto, some person is elected who does their best for us. Well, some exceptions. The Greens, for instance, are meant to be an environmental group, but all they seem to worry about now is Gaza. So, yeah, 2,500 miles away. Why bother? So the only way that they're fixed is that brain dead numpties vote for the Greens. That's the only fixing that's done. And before heading on to the next one of my little rants, I'd just like to remind you that conspiracy theorists are actually allowed to breed freely. They're allowed to drive cars. This can mean 2-ton machines on motorways at up to 70 miles an hour. And also, they're allowed to buy alcohol unsupervised. Keep that in mind when you think of the rubbish that they come out with. Moving on now to the hantavirus, which you've probably all read about and seen. The cruise ship that was stricken with hantavirus a week or so ago, depending on when this video was posted. Few people very, very sadly lost their lives as a result. Well, of course, hantavirus, it's a hoax. It's a big hoax because it's a side effect of, this is according to the conspiracy theorists, and they're not to be taken lightly. Yes, I know what you mean, yes. I can hear your brains whirring, dear folks. Yes, it's a side effect of COVID, and it was also designed at the very time to come out so that it would fix the elections. You make that up if you can. But a little bit of research will reveal, and you've just got to go to authoritative research sites. It's no good going to ThickTack or Instagranny, because they'll tell you that it was made in China and distributed by Temu. It affects rodents. The only complicated thing it does do is that it seems to sort of, from what I can see, mutate, meaning that it's quite hard to keep tracks on it, because once the rodent, usually a rat, but then again, squirrels and mice are rodents, it sort of can create problems because they have a cure for it, or maybe something to alleviate the symptoms, and it doesn't get rid because somebody else has caught a different version of it. But no, dear conspiracy theorists, nothing to do with COVID-19, I'm afraid, and certainly nothing to do with the local elections, although you and I know there's certainly plenty of rats who did run for election. Now, I don't know if you've got the same in your area, but in our area, according to the knowledgeable great conspiracy theorists, the potholes have been designed by councils. Yes, they're there so that we don't drive our cars because we're frightened to maybe go into one. Or on the other hand, they are there because they are driven, no pun intended, by the elite who now own all the fix-it companies for cars. And this is probably related to the fact that not too long ago, well, December 2021, National Tire, sorry, the other way around, I beg your pardon, Halfords bought over National Tire and Auto Care to create a rather large company. And of course, that is owned by one of the elites. Yes, we'll come back to elites a little bit later on. And the idea that this has all been totally contrived with the councils working in league with the large motor companies, motor fix-it companies, to create chaos and keep motorists off the road is just utterly ridiculous. Because I don't know about you, but when I used to drive, I had an absolutely excellent backstreet mechanic who used to fix my car, do my MOT, and that was it. And again, if you look up the statistics, particularly from the National Office of Statistics, and you see how many backstreet car mechanics there are, official ones, you know, paying tax and paying national insurance and all that sort of stuff, you'll see that there are thousands upon thousands serving their local communities. And they'd have no connection whatsoever with either the elite, unless it's an old Omega or Vectra elite going in to be fixed. No connection whatsoever. So again, more complete nonsense. Now, if you have the misfortune to be taken into hospital with something wrong with you, and irrespective of the queues or the stress on the NHS, they do a damn fine job. So let's not knock these wonderful nurses and doctors. Yes, I suppose some of the doctors who are very well paid do have a habit of sort of suddenly going out on strike. If you can't live on a six-figure sum, there's something very wrong with how you're leading your life. But the nurses and doctors in the NHS have been instructed by the elite, yes, they're back again, to test the drugs from the drug companies using us as guinea pigs. Now, if you've ever been into a busy A&E department, I don't think that the nurses and doctors have time to go specifically pressing buttons and choosing, oh, we'll do that one. That's Acme drug. Let's try that out on them and see what happens. He's had a big stab wound from a football match, so if he dies, doesn't make any difference, but we'll see what the reaction is. What a load of utter, can I say the word bollocks? Am I allowed to say that? Hope so. Said it now anyway, too late. So no, they're not using patients as unwillingly as guinea pigs. Where do they get this nonsense from? Yes, I know, Thick Tack and Instagranny, and they don't double check their facts. It's an interesting note, just to as an aside, that many of the conspiracy theorists are actually PIP and fake disability claimants. They're quite happy to go to the NHS and waste their time on different things, not realizing exactly how many hundreds of pounds a time their visits cost. For our next gem, let's step back to 200. I'm living in the past, aren't I? To 2014 and a website called hustlers.com. Don't go looking it up because it's been taken down long, long ago. Anyway, that site had a strapline, don't believe what you read here. That was on the original website, so secondhand stories are probably not filtering down with that. But they put a story up in 2014, bearing in mind it's a satirical site, just taking the urine out of the establishment, and they claim that McDonald's in Oklahoma, a factory in Oklahoma, was using human meat to make the burgers, in particular, children from homes, orphans. Now, if you or I read that, and I'm sure most of you watching this read that, you think, nah, that's utter nonsense with all the food controls and the agencies around and independent media, the ones not controlled by the elite, don't get too alarmed, the independent media and people who go searching for things would immediately go and have a look and see, well, what's the credibility of this extremely stupid story? Because if it got out, of course, it would ostensibly just sink McDonald's business. McDonald's, irrespective of the fact that their burgers never look like how they seem in the advertising for it, no idea how they managed to get such great business as a result of their awful burgers that you buy in their restaurants. Never look like what you're eating. But that crept out, and people just didn't bother to check further. They just took this secondhand story, did the rounds again about 18 months ago, a year ago, and just no foundation in truth whatsoever. And if you do look up the internet, it's loads of sites, plenty of sites, and plenty of authoritative ones are telling us all that, yes, it was just purely a hoax that got out of control. But no, conspiracy theorists don't believe that. They're definitely using human meat. So when you go into your McDonald's, I think the only connection with human meat is that sometimes you find their burgers can be rather cremated. One of the more nasty ones to circulate, rather racist ones, was that last summer there were several people running around warning everybody, telling us that the Islamists are going to attack girls' schools with machetes. Yes, just girls' schools, so if you have a mixed boys' school, no problem. Now that is a positively dangerous, racist, and disgusting one to come up with. Yes, I know there are certain schools in the community, particularly Jewish ones, that thankfully, because of these very irresponsible people like MPs in particular, I can think of some, but I won't name them, other MPs are available, and some of the sort of celebrities, the useful idiots, they stir things up, and it then encourages the one or two very stupid people to think, oh yes, right, they don't think that it's 2,500 miles away, the conflict. They think, well, let's go and stab some Jews because they're responsible for it. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, great. But this particular story was just so nasty. I mean, if some very uneducated conspiracy theorist knows for a fact, and it was claimed for a fact, that the Islamists are going to attack schools, surely the likes of the authorities, the police, the councils, the school authorities, and yes, I know some of these school unions operate really as the way they're going, they operate as a PR arm for Hamas. But that having been said, what a dangerous thing to spread. And all the good Muslim folk who live and work here, I mean, have they any right to be subjected to such abuse for something that's not their fault? It is very wrong. I'm sorry. Now, there's a riot I like to see, not the type of one where you've got lefties and righties arguing in town. This is a riot of colour in the local park. And I just spied this from afar. Isn't that lovely? I know I say isn't that lovely to a lot of things, but just thought I'd share with you a bit of flora, not the margarine. And of course, it's all intertwined with what I said about the elite. Is yes, as it happens, the conspiracy theorists are not. Oh, sorry, I thought I saw a little gathering of conkers there. I was thinking it's the wrong time of year. The elite certainly do have a responsibility, but they're the elite like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, who run the social platforms that these ill-informed idiots pick their supposedly alleged news from. So yes, the elite are at fault. And Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, well, Elon Musk, now the richest man in the world, yes, you could say he's elite. He does good stuff, but at times he's as mad as a bat. Mark Zuckerberg, if you have a problem on Arsebook or on Instagrammy, you try contacting a human at Facebook to try and get it corrected. The only time he moves into action is if you besmirch one of his advertisers. Then he's there like a pig to muck. But the elite, really, I mean, it's all right knocking the elite all the time as these people do, but can you imagine where the country would be if it wasn't for the elite? I mean, look at the elite, that they're all, again, they fall into perhaps, they're very clever people. They're not always very intelligent, but just look at the thousands and thousands of jobs they provide, the millions of pounds worth of national insurance, VAT, tax, and business rates and rent, or the rent tends to go to pension funds or private individuals. But just look how much that they are providing in terms of the social fabric of the country. Yes, there's no doubt that perhaps the elite of the water companies have not done a very good job at being elitist. They've lined their own pockets and lined the pockets of shareholders abroad, thanks largely to the governments, successive governments, not keeping an eye on what's going on. Before privatization, electricity, I'm doubling down on myself here now, the water companies, they were largely debt-free before privatization. But the other side of the coin is that the public were invited to become shareholders. And if you're a shareholder in something, you do expect it to have a little bit of a return, to give a little bit of a return rather than just be an interest-free loan. But that having been said, if you don't perform correctly, like so many of the water company bosses have done, what right have you got to a huge 7-figure salary or a bonus being rewarded for just being useless? Not right at all. If I was brave enough, I'd pick some of those nettles and get the Hairy Biker's book out and make some nettle soup. But then again, with the weather possibly up to the mid-20s next week, it's not quite the best weather to have soup. Get all sweaty Betty, eh what? I say, look, what you do with a video. Thank you very much. There we are, another little view of the library, just to bore you totally. Thank you very much for watching. And as I always say at the end of my videos, please be safe.